Welcome back, Oddcasters. It's May 3rd. Last week we talked about what is a generation. We defined our individual generations. 5 of us on here are millennials, and 1 of us is Gen X. So this week we're going to talk about what is some of the differences. We didn't really get into what are the differences. We all know what are the stereotypes. Do we agree with them? Do we disagree with them? How do we feel about them? If you do a Google algorithm search, you'll find that millennials think that baby boomers are stupid. Baby boomers think millennials are stupid. And Gen Xers think both millennials and baby boomers are also stupid. So it seems like we have a lot in common, but what are the differences? So let's get into that a little bit. So it's really cool. I mean, if you just go into your Google search and type millennials are, you see so many autofills, right? So you might learn millennials are obsessed with food. There's, like I mentioned, they're stupid, lazy, sensitive, and they think they're important, right? Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, good. And then there's Generation X, right? We have who's our Generation Xer here?
Oh yeah.
Hello, John.
All right, so what do you learn by searching Google on Generation X? You learn that they're the cynical group, okay? These are people born, what was it, 77, John? So we got Generation Xers. Generation X are born from 1965 to 1976. They're 40,
I guess that's
44 to 55 years old right now.
55 to 1980.
Yeah, it can be. I think the cutoff there, which we got into last week, was the Berlin Wall, right? So people that were alive, you know, they might have been born in 79, or sorry, the Berlin Wall's 89. So never mind that. They are actually the smallest generation. And they're mostly frustrated with baby boomers. Is that true, John?
No, not at all. I'm not frustrated with no baby boomers.
Who are you frustrated with?
No one. We're supposed to not care about anything.
So you
That
don't
sounds
play
like Generation Z to me.
right? Generation Z. So they're born right in 2000 or after 1995. I mean, we wanted to kind of get into some of the differences here, and I heard that there was a lot of people that wanted to talk about that.
I guess I was saying I didn't like where I was placed as a millennial because I just felt really old school. I don't know because my one sister is 20 years older than me. My older sister was watching 90210. I mean, the show was kind of going over my head, but I watched it. And I
had an older sister who went through the same thing.
Yeah, it's like I feel like I was watching older shows that I wasn't even ready for. You know, I was watching The Simpsons, but also I had to watch Seinfeld, which I love Seinfeld now as an adult, but when I was younger, kind of went over my head. But I also was late getting a cell phone too, like a smartphone. I mean.
So you're Tammy. What I think you're saying is that they influenced you more, being the younger sibling, than you influencing them. So that's really interesting, right? If you are the oldest in the family, born the same year you were, maybe you would feel that as more of a millennial than as if you are your current situation.
That's correct.
What year did we all get our first cell phone? I got mine in 2002. I was 18, right out of high school.
That was really the changing point too.
Yeah.
Sophomore year of high school. That's my guess.
Yeah, I'd say sophomore as well.
Senior year, I think. Junior to senior.
Dang. Your parents were like, you don't deserve that.
You know what? I take that back. I think I had a cell phone when I was 16 when I started driving. You know, they got one of those Nokia penny phones.
Yeah, I think I was 16 or 17.
I remember pagers.
So I guess I could say
John,
the generation experiences changed that I don't feel like a millennial.
I guess John had a pager. Is that what they called it back in the boomer?
I had a pager too.
So Tammy, you seem to think that you base it kind of more on technology and not other stuff. Are you putting more emphasis or weight on the generation based on technology?
Experiences. So like I was saying, even the TV shows, I was watching stuff that was way too old for me, and I was watching that. You know, I guess that's why I haven't fixed up my own house, because it's I was raised with this old house, my dad was watching the TV, and we didn't have cable, so kind of just had to watch what other people were watching, and I guess my older siblings you know, like you said, influenced me to.
Your sister, you said you have a sister that's 4 years older than you?
Yes.
And so she would technically fall within the millennial generation as well.
She's
She's
4
like-
years older than me. I thought she was like John, like close to John's age.
For
'Cause
me,
I feel like she doesn't call herself a millennial. I feel like she always calls her Generation X. Isn't that what John is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. They definitely see like a little bit of the plus or minus 3 years on the ends, on like where you can kind of fall, because it's not just the TV shows and the technology. It's also like world events. So John, what would you say that separates you from all of us here that are born post 1980? What would you think that like you can say that you experienced that we did not, and it influenced you that we didn't have that influence?
I would for
Atari.
me,
Sorry.
late '80s, we had heavy metal, hard rock, White Snake, Motley Crue,
What's going on?
Guns N' Roses, like Nirvana, and then we had the grunge movement.
So you don't think that we experienced that?
Well, he said he had Nirvana, we had Nickelback, I guess, in a sense, growing up. Like I guess like it was the grunge to the post-grunge.
What's Nirvana? Is that like a
Shut
is that
up.
like a cereal or
It's a
something?
meditational type, like a
Yoga.
peace zen type experience.
We are actually, I think what they say is Generation X and our generation, beginning millennial, I'm going to say, we were on the beginning cusp of millennial. We understand each other more so than Z and that motorcycle that just drove by.
Sorry.
It's okay. Z and the baby boomers and Z, who do not see like eye to eye as much.
Hey, I mean,
Does anyone remember Guns N' Roses
yeah.
when they came?
Yeah.
Welcome to the jungle.
Well, like nowadays we can all experience music. Like in your generation, you had to go to like a record store to hear something or so. Like I think the introduction of like LimeWire and just like internet streaming and stuff is definitely one of the changes between like millennial
Anyone
versus Generation X, I would say.
Yeah.
Because we have access to all that music. I mean, I don't think you had MTV. I'd say you were the generation that probably consumed a lot of music videos. We kind of
You guys had Jersey Shore.
Oh,
really?
Do you guys
no.
remember? You guys remember the box?
Yeah.
The box. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that for some of our viewers that aren't?
I believe it was called the box, right, Tammy?
It's kind of like an MTV. Like
Yeah,
I don't know,
I
you
felt like
watch
it was like
music
our first like interactive type of entertainment in a way. Well, not the first type of entertainment, but yeah, it was music videos, and I guess you could either call in and have a specific music video played, and it would come up like either next or like in a few music videos later. It would cost, I think it would cost some money though. It was like $5, a few bucks or something.
it kind of reminded me of like a radio station where you can call and request a song, and you could they'll play the music video on that channel.
So I mean, what
Kind
it
of like
makes,
MTV music videos.
It
so it's
sounds
more viewer select. So it became more personalized, right? More viewers, actual viewers had a say in what was going on, kind of like a radio call-in request channel. So maybe in previous generations, right, they didn't have that type of personalization. They were kind of set on what is available, right? So, I mean, definitely more options have influenced all these newer generations, right? John, I mean, how many channels did you have on your television when you first remember TV?
started out with probably 20.
Damn, that's a lot.
Wow. That's a lot?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, we didn't have cable until I was 10.
Yeah, so
So-
I feel like it was
Wow.
36. What was it, like 3, 6, 9, 10, channel 17, 57.
24.
Yeah.
Fox 24. Yeah, I mean, I thought there was. I mean, I just remember like less than 10, and then it just increased up to like 50s and then hundreds, and
Right.
it's ridiculous. But that's the way it is, and that's good. Everybody, I don't know. I see that as kind of creating everyone's own, where we've gotten to now, this own little echo chamber where you create your own bubble of information.
Listen to this. The Box, How a Forgotten TV Network Changed Music and Predicted the Future. I'm surprised. I'm really surprised that just Tammy and I are seem like to be like the only ones that remember The Box.
Was it a channel on television?
It was a it was like it was a channel. Like you went to it, and I feel like that's where like all the popular music videos were being played at the time.
So do you remember what time of your life this came out about? How old you were?
It
Or
was
what
definitely
year?
either high school or middle school. It said it opened up floodgates for audiences aching for music they weren't seeing or hearing elsewhere, especially hip hop, which the box helped vault from subcultural curiosity. It says a proto YouTube showing the pre-internet world. Sorry, I'm taking this over. I don't mean to. I'm just surprised. I thought it was a pretty big channel
Big for
Or not.
millennials.
network. That's funny.
Boom. Just like that. I'm a millennial.
That was one of my questions, right? I mean, you guys kind of already, kind of answered this question I had was, is there any media or, that you think, any media that has actually shaped your identity, that makes you feel a part of that generation? And most, I hear TV shows, music. Is there other things that have, outside of TV or music?
Yeah,
that have
remember when
shaped
it first started reality shows too? Like The Real World, was that when that first started too?
The real
Yeah.
was
Around
huge.
our time.
That
Survivor.
was those two shows were what bridged. I think they connected millennials and X because we were both watching it. I know that because I got an older brother and sister, of course. So like that, they were watching that. I think one show like I want to say Family Guy too was like more our generation, not before. Like I don't
The
think
creator was Gen X, right?
he was Gen X.
Who?
The creator of Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane.
Yep.
You're right, but what Aaron's saying is like a lot of Generation Xers like don't really watch Family Guy. I think it's pretty popular.
I mean,
but,
I think we're going into a lot of still what we talked about last week about defining your own generation, but this is supposed to be about generational differences. So let's go into some of these actual differences, right? So one of the big things that I noticed was the marriage thing, right? It says millennials are less likely to be married than previous generations at the same age. I think if all of us were 30 years ago, I mean, we'd all be married with kids, or at least 5 out of 6 of us. What are some of the reasons why you think that that the millennials have less marriage? They don't. Is it because they don't believe in it? Is this not as important, or are they focused on financial things first, or what's the reasons?
I've thought about that quite a bit. I think one of the reasons might be we assess the positive and negatives, and we focus on the negatives and see what didn't seem to work out for a lot of people. Like, parents will say like, "Oh, I didn't have a chance to further my career. I didn't have a chance to do that. You should go to school. You should do that. Wait till you're old. Wait till you finish this. Do you have a career to have a family?" So we view that as like, "Oh, I should do that," because that was a negative for them. And then we see other negatives too, like the divorce rate. That's one that's pretty common that pops up. So people will say, "Oh, I should be more cautious before I get married," things like that. So it's like I think it's like we kind of reflect and think back and look at why we shouldn't, and just not just fall in line.
That's great points. I didn't even think about it that way before, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, like I did mention in last week's podcast that parenting was the #1 influencer on generations. And so it's not even just parenting techniques. It's what they tell you not to do, or things that they missed out on, and then they're trying to make that world for you, right? Or set you up the best way so that you can have things that they were baby boomers, right? And their generation had it really tough, right? So they were raised by parents that maybe were a little more strict because they had to go through a tough life. So they wanted to make sure that their kids were strong enough to survive through something as tough. And what Brinker was showing or telling us is that parents who maybe were raised like that did not get to have all certain experiences. And they kind of have told us that, like, make sure you travel, make sure you get education, make sure you do this. So marriage had been kind of pushed back. And he also mentioned about higher divorce rates, in our parents' generations. So a lot of these factors maybe have led to lower marriage rates in millennials and Gen Z.
I guess I was kind of surprised when you said about high rate for the baby boomer generation for divorce rate, because I feel like there's a lot of people I know that it was kind of like it was kind of shunned upon, that they just kind of stayed together and didn't do the divorce thing. I don't know. Maybe it was just an Italian thing where it was kind of just shunned upon, that they didn't really do it. You know, they kind of lived separate lives, but they never divorced, kind of thing, because it would look bad if you divorced. Versus now, it's kind of like nobody cares. You could, my generation, you can be married 7 times, nobody bats an eye.
I think tradition like that, it's changing, where, and it's kind of recycling too. So there's like a stage of rebellion that happens later with like future generations, and then they want to go back to tradition too. So I think marriage is tradition, and I think what Brinker's bringing up is stats, and like we've gotten kind of wiser at looking at it. And also then there's the struggle with tradition, so those two things kind of battle each other out through the generations. Sure. Maybe
True. Also, like I guess I agree on like
Well,
how
I
like
just
I guess people waiting to get married, our generation waits to get married, which I guess lowers that statistic of divorce too. I could see that, because it's we're not jumping into a marriage unless we know for sure.
Yeah, I think the divorce rate is actually a lot lower for millennials or whatever. I think that is definitely a side effect. If you wait longer, there's less chance of a divorce instead of younger generations got married really early.
Tammy, can I ask you? I was just giving, like reasons of why I thought possible reasons why I thought things were kind of changed a little bit, but I guess I felt like the divorce rate was when I was growing up was always mentioned like here and there.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Ryan. It definitely, I mean, and both of you are right. Like, it decreased for millennials just for that, because that same reason. They saw the problems that divorce caused, so they were more cautious. It's like we're more cautious because we saw a higher divorce rate in our parents' generation, right? So it's like you have less people getting married, therefore also less people getting divorced.
Gotcha.
Right.
That's true. Yeah.
I can tell that in around 2009, there was a research study, and they said that divorce rate was at around 55%, 60% at that time. And it has gone down gradually over the last 10 years.
That's true, John. I looked that up a little while ago because I was just curious, and it's gone down. Like it's balanced out more. I think before it was like like 60-40, like 60% of couples were getting divorced over 40, but now I think it's actually like more like half and half, which is that's good to hear, good to see.
The marriage rate is also going back to the marriage rate. It's also tied to education. It shows that bachelor degree or higher for millennials, 53% are married, and then just a high school graduation, it's down to 40%. So there's a 13% difference in education level, whether you're likely to get married or not. And
Gotcha.
and that's not necessarily true for if you go back to early and later boomers and even further back, lower education meant higher marriage rates.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of an interesting thing that actually switched here,
Right.
is that now you're more. It may have to do with the financial part of it. I don't know, but that was pretty interesting just to see that. Yeah, lower education generations back were more likely to get married than today.
That is kind of interesting because I always thought that it seemed like when we think about just education today, like I'm sure a lot of you guys know people that didn't go to college, maybe they went to like a trade school, a vocational school, and they jump right into something like a career-based type job, and then because they're already in a career, they're ready to get married when they meet someone and start a family and stuff. So it's almost like for those people, it's like less. Not saying that they're not educated, but less school.
Yeah.
Less school means that they jump in and they get married sooner, almost.
They're available to get married. They have that financial stability. They know how much they're going to be pulling in.
Yeah.
making a year.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about 30 to 40-year jobs, right? When our parents got out of, they could get out of high school and find a job that they would be in for 30 or 40 years and maybe likely collect a pension. That doesn't exist today. How has that influenced any of your thinking?
Yeah, that's got to be a huge change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like my grandfather, like, it was like he like graduated college. He was in the Navy for a little bit, but then he was just like came back to college, went to grad school, bing bang boom, and it was just but it was so much smoother. And I remember my dad even telling me that, like, he said like when I was going through the whole our whole college application process, he was saying to me, he was like so surprised on how competitive and difficult and how time consuming it was to get into school. He said when I was your age, all the colleges were just pulling people in. They wanted more students. Like, it was a new thing. They wanted students. It wasn't this competitive type of situation to get into. So it was smoother and easier for a lot of things.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that some of the younger kids, when I hear them, like younger patients, when the doctor asks, like, oh, what college are you thinking about, and how they have how the things they have to do to get ready, like to just even apply for college, that they have to have, like, besides do a sport, they had to have like volunteer work on their application for college. They had to have like so much stuff. Like, it seems really a lot more stressful to apply for colleges now. I mean, I don't know if it's all of them, but the nicer ones definitely. It sounded like it was like that you had to do extra stuff to be separated from the rest. I couldn't believe it. Someone did like a different instrument just to, I don't know, like the show, like on an application. I just couldn't believe it when I was hearing about it, like all the work that they go through. I was
Right?
like, wow.
Yeah.
I just remember just applying and then just going, all right, we'll take your money,
I mean, the competition has definitely increased. When you look at Generation X, like, there was a little less than 200 million people in the United States. And then, when millennials were born, there was about 220 to 270. And then it's only increased there from 270 to 330. So, I mean, you're talking about another 100 million people. And out of that, right, that's how many of those are competing for the same spots in the same schools. And you got to set yourself apart, right? And, right, millennials are kind of stereotyped as they want to be this, everyone's special, right? And you typically hear about these participation awards, and right, and that's a major thing that I hear from older generations, mocking, right? It's used as a form of like mocking them and disagreeing with it, saying that's not a good thing to do.
Yeah, I actually kind of just thought about that now as you mentioned it. It's ironic that they make fun of us and make jokes and stuff about that. How everyone's special, everybody gets a trophy, everyone's a winner. But on the flip side, it's like things are so much more competitive for them. Where it's kind of like, what's the reality of it?
Speaking of ironic, would you consider Alanis Morissette's "Isn't It Ironic" as an iconic generational song for us?
Well, it did have Flea on the bass, so.
Oh, I did not know that, actually.
And Dave Navarro played the guitar on that.
What?
What?
Did not know that either.
I didn't either. It's a good song though. Good song.
I still sing it today, and I still play that song, once every couple of weeks for my little 17-month-old son. So I'm keeping him fresh. He's gonna feel like a Gen Xer someday.
I feel like I don't remember getting participation trophies and awards, but maybe we did. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to it as much.
Like sports, we did.
Was it like certificates that like, you're good at spelling, like, but I thought, like, I remember being semi-competitive because it's like not everybody got the same paper award, like, paper certificate that said like you're good at spelling and you're really good at math and you're really good at sports. Like, I guess I do remember like, fictitious like trophies being given out, but not everybody got one. Like, I feel like the younger generation, it seems like everybody gets one now. like you're all good at spelling, you're all good at math, like, participation awards.
Yeah.
How did you guys
Especially
feel
kids.
about Like,
Yeah.
do you guys remember getting those participation trophies? Because
Never.
I don't-
Maybe
I had to work for my gold stars, man.
yeah,
App superstars.
oh yeah, the stressful sticker board. Yeah, when the teacher put the gold star.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like, yes.
I mean, one of the problems I see is that the millennial generation is also confused, often confused for Generation Z, right? The generation that's actually 20, the oldest member of Generation Z is 25 years old now, 24,
Damn.
right? So a lot of things that were banked on millennials they were actually talking about Generation Z, which we didn't experience.
Mm.
So that's one thing I see. I saw a post today, and it said it was comparing the struggles that somebody who went through the Dust Bowl in the 20s, the struggles that they went through, to the millennials struggle today during the quarantine, and it showed somebody drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette, and I was like, that could be a Generation Z person. They're 25 years old. Who knows, right? Irregardless, one picture doesn't describe a whole generation, but. Yeah, so that's one thing I see is the confusion between generations. One last topic I'd like to talk about in today's podcast is voting, political participation. Clearly, what I see from the statistics is that participation is indirectly proportional to age right now. So the younger you are, the less involved you are in politics now. Why do you think that is? Do you think we're all just jaded? And then we don't think that
You said the younger you are, the less involved you are in politics?
But that seems like that would be a common thing for many generations. I feel like young kids at least for me growing up, didn't care about politics, and I imagine young kids now, though I feel like a lot of the younger kids are more environmental conscious now. Like they're political in some ways, I would say. There's definitely more.
I was gonna say I feel like there was a resurgence with maybe not the youngest generation, but like I'm saying young adults now, that they were being more involved into politics. So you're saying those people are not involved? I didn't know that. I thought it was the opposite. So my bad.
Trying to find out. Okay, here we go. It looks like the median. So if you're 60 years old, for 60-year-olds, it's about 80% participation, like voting and presidential turnouts, right? And then when you go down to 20-year-olds, it's somewhere around 45%. So 45% of 20-year-olds, even 20 to 25-year-olds are voting. So 40% of 20 to 25-year-olds are voting, and around 80% of 60-year-olds to 80-year-olds are voting, right? So granted, there's a lot larger population of younger people today, right? That's happens, but a lot less percentage of them are voting. I mean but that's been consistent. I'm not saying that has changed. So just like Josh was saying, it's a very consistent thing. So
more so.
How many? Who here has voted? Well, the last election. Who voted in the last election?
I have a question. So you don't think the baby boomer, since they're like a larger amount of population people, like born at a certain time, hit like a certain age, that it's not that affecting that statistic because now they're all like older, and there's like more of them.
Well, there's actually more millennials, and there's about 80 million millennials and 80 million Generation Z. And then there's about 50 million Generation X alive, and about, I think it was around 60 million baby boomers. So Gen Z and millennials, the most recent, are much more populated. Like there's a lot more of them than there are in Gen X.
Wow. I don't know if faced another like Social Security problem with that we're facing with the, people complain about the baby boomers still like, they're still alive and they're still working and they're collecting a lot of Social Security and there's more of them versus us replenishing the pot. So I wonder if like when generation millennials get older that we'll have that situation again where it would be a threat again.
Well, that's how it's supposed to work. Definitely. You're supposed to have the younger generations paying for older generations because we're still under our parents, or then we're working, so we shouldn't need Social Security yet. But it's weird to think that millennials, we see the world differently, right? Than we see.
Yeah. Just before Tammy jumped in there, so Ryan, you voted, I voted, Josh didn't vote, Aaron or John, did you guys vote?
I voted.
We're talking about the 2016 presidential election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tammy, did you
I
vote?
voted in every single election except for that one.
Okay,
And that
so
was,
you, okay,
and that
so
was
you,
mostly specifically because my car broke down.
okay, I remember that. So
I
you
was
usually,
actually
okay,
heading to the polling place. It was like a sign from
okay,
Jesus, I
okay.
guess.
So yeah, so we'll consider
I was
you.
trying to. My
Okay,
car,
so
it cost $3,000
Sounds
to
like-
fix that thing.
so we'll consider you having. Yeah, so you vote usually. So.
I vote. You
Okay.
usually don't vote. I think this was inspired you, right? To vote? Had you vote in previous elections?
I did, yes.
Oh,
in
okay.
previous election, yeah. Tammy, what about you?
I voted in previous elections, but I did not vote this past time.
Okay, so John, what about you? Previous elections?
Yes.
Because you said
Yeah, I did. I voted in the previous election.
okay. So tough. It seems like
Well, it's hard
well,
to sample 6 people. I guess it's a bigger,
I guess
you
I just
could- you
I
could
yeah I
still-
guess I was thinking originally that was like 50-50 with us, but it seems like it's not. It seems
What
like maybe
about
just
Well,
primaries?
Celsius,
You know, like
Who wants to vote in the next election?
yeah, hell yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah. I mean, because I feel like, Brinker, you're kind of apolitical in some ways, I'd say. Like, for me, I'm like kind of a political junkie where I consume a lot of political news.
yeah.
So I'm pretty invested in that stuff.
Yeah, I would agree
For
with
you,
that.
I would say, like a lot of my friends, they just, they follow like the important stuff, but it's not like something they personally are like really. So like, for this election coming up, though, do you feel like you'll probably vote, or you're just not sure?
I'm not sure, but I'm leaning on probably not.
Okay.
It all depends. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I feel like if I don't have an educated decision, I don't feel confident in voting. But then again, there's people that have like told me otherwise. They're saying you should vote regardless.
Yeah,
This
maybe-
answers what Del P was just saying. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. But,
No, go ahead.
but Del P was just saying, why isn't the millennials not voting? That just answered it for us. Like, we're all kind of like jaded, or like the word you used earlier, like just kind of like we're like unsure, like we're not 100% sure in our answer to like vote.
Maybe we're more conscientious of what the voting means, right? People tend to maybe just to vote for the last thing that they heard. They might base their vote on something they just recently heard in the last week that changes.
And I don't think Biden is going to bring in the young vote. I don't know. Again, I think if Bernie was the Democratic nominee, I think that would have somewhat mobilized the younger voters. I don't think Biden, not to get too much into politics, is just I don't think he resonates with younger people at all. Like he is definitely, those 80-year-olds that, 80% of older people, he's hitting that demographic pretty hard. I think there has to be politics. I don't know. There has to be someone that inspires the people, like the younger people. I think environmental issues,
Yeah,
like
but do
the
you think-
environment, all those are things that like I feel like young people are really passionate about. So
Yeah. It's
That's a generational difference. That there's each generation may require something different to inspire them to vote.
I don't want to get into it either too much, but didn't Bernie kind of drop out because the younger votes didn't show up?
Yeah.
again, and that's kind of shows to the statistics that Ryan was showing that the turnout was just really high, and for younger people, granted, there could have been some people like they would have voted in the main election, but when it came to the primaries, they just they just didn't turn up in the areas that he kind of needed them to. So
for a moment, Bernie stayed in, thinking, "Oh, they're probably just dialing back and not voting." But they'll show
now, I think
up.
he kind of knew he started off pretty strong. Like he won the first couple primaries, but I think he had to realize like after like the fifth or sixth when Biden just started sweeping, that it was over. I think he wanted to leverage. I think if he had the younger vote, he wanted to leverage maybe something like environmental issues or college or universal health care. I think he wanted to leverage maybe his endorsement of Biden with some type of political. But I don't know. This whole Corona thing happened, and it just kind of changed. And I don't know. I think they wanted to unify the party.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about why.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Yeah,
And now you got like the whatever the Tara Reid Biden stuff, so that's just whatever. I'm not even gonna get
we'll
into
save that for one of our reaction videos.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be
Event videos.
I know nothing of this speaking.
I also know nothing of this speaking.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
That's fine. That's fine.
I mean, Brinker, you brought up a good point, right? Not voting based on not having all the information, right? If you didn't feel like you could make a good, educated vote, you choose to abstain.
Correct.
Do you believe
Right,
in abstinence, Brinker?
Whereas other people know they don't have enough information, but they, a lot of people are one issue voters. So,
Or they're team players. Like they're just like,
Yeah.
I'm Democratic, I'm gonna vote Democrat. I'm Republican, I'm voting Republican.
Yeah,
or again,
yeah.
like it's like abortion is usually like a big issue for some people. They don't care about any other issues, but if their politician is for or against abortion, that's all they need to hear. So,
yeah, abortion, gun rights,
oh yeah.
so I think I wonder if one trend, I don't know the statistics on this, but I wonder if the trend for single issue voters has maintained the same over generations or is decreasing. Now that we have so much more information at our fingertips and it's a 24/7 basis, do you think there's still as many single issue voters? I mean, in younger generations, do you think younger generations are not single issue voters as much as the older generations are?
I would say that's a good chance there's probably less single issue voters now than there was probably, but I don't know. I don't have any statistics on that to back that up.
So like abortion, right, seems to be tied with religion a lot of times, and that's one of the statistics I found was that participation in organized religion has had a steady, pretty significant, I can't tell you the numbers right now, but has been decreasing over the last generations. From when I had mentioned about last week, the millennial generation splitting into two, and one of those generations or one of the sub generations were still doing everything that they were taught as children, maybe included in that was like attending church or synagogue or temple or wherever their family took them on
Tradition.
a special day of the week. But a lot of the second sub generation has kind of stopped that, right? So I mean, I'm definitely one of those people who grew up doing that weekly, and then as soon as I reached the age of reason, I dropped that. I stopped doing that because I realized that I can be good for goodness sake. I can actually use that time that I would have spent actually doing something more for myself or for my family or for my community. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons, but I don't think you had that option in older generations. Were shunned upon if you stopped doing that kind of stuff. Do you think that you've had the freedom, regardless of what you choose to do on a weekly basis with regards to religion, do you think that you had more of an option as a younger generation than the older generations had?
That's a good question. I think we do have more of an option. I think it depends on how your parents were raised, but I think each generation, I would assume that they probably became a little bit more and more open-minded as time went on. Because I don't remember my parents saying anything about them having a choice to stop going to church, like when they were like young teenagers. That didn't happen. But I mean, just like you, Ryan, I certainly did. Like, I think I was probably like 9 or 10, and my mom, my parents were like, and my dad just went along with my mom, and my mom was like, if you guys don't really want to go to church anymore, it's up to you.
I mean, I was actually the factor that caused my parents to go to church more because I did youth group. So my parents were actually starting to go to church. Like growing up, it was like every Sunday. Then it was like once a couple times a month. Then it was holidays. But because I was in the youth group and the youth band, they kind of had to force themselves to keep going to church and stuff. So in a sense, it was kind of mine was
Josh is like, Mom, we're gonna be late, and they were like, oh God.
I remember the time I came back from a work group meeting, and they were all like, Josh found Jesus. He found his moment. And my mom was looking at them like, is this some like weird cult shit? But she looked at it, she's like, okay. Like she was kind of weirded out a little bit by yeah. So that was an era of my life in the past, I guess.
What happened?
And now you're studying to be a priest, am I correct?
Mhm.
He is studying to be a priest.
Yes.
Josh ran away from youth group, bro. You ran away.
I mean,
In life.
no, because I had like a work camp where there was a worker who like was on the rooftop, and we were building like a house in Georgia, and he was like, "Did you ever accept that Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins?" And I was like, "No, I never really put it that way." And he was like, "Well, do you want to accept it right now?" And I was like, I guess that's fine. And he was like, "This is a glorious moment." So that night, there was like 400 of us in like an auditorium, and we were having the meeting, and he comes up on the front. He's like, "I got great news, everyone. We have one of us found Jesus." He's like, "Josh, come on down." And everyone got up, was clapping, was like crying. And I was sitting there like, what the hell's going on? And I was just like, yeah, I found Jesus. And then like, I walked away and sat down, and everyone was giving me hugs. That's the story. Like when I came back, they were all talking about like, Josh found Jesus. And my mom's just like, what the hell happened? So I don't know. That was the moment for me.
What was the name of the missionary you joined? What was that again?
Well, I mean, it's good
Get a little
work in a
personal.
sense. It was like work camps where you go to like different states and you help build houses or for poor people or so kind of thing.
So I mean, that's interesting though about just having a choice, and your parents loving you regardless for who you are, and that's something that I guess shouldn't be taken for granted, because the majority of human history it hasn't been that way, and in a lot of places in the world. So that's kind of something specific to,
Science?
well, I'd say modern culture. More modern, technologically driven cultures, because that's something major that definitely influences our life, our voting, our thinking, our what we decide to do with our lives, and a lot of times that's politics and religion is a topic, right? Are topics that you're told not to talk about, but do you think those two are they just topics that our parents were told not to talk about and they passed that down on us? Right? Why are we not allowed to talk about those?
Well, I think we talk about it more in a social media presence now. I feel like when you're on social media platforms, I think people are more open to talk about those things than face to face. Because I've had issues, you talk to someone that disagrees with you politically online and you're starting up a fight. But when you see them in person, you're just like, hey, how's it go? I don't know. There's a different dynamic. I think that I think our technology has grown, it's made us more, I don't know, hyper in that sense.
Everyone nowadays feels the need to be connected. It's like a driven thing. That's a huge difference in the new generations versus the old one, I think.
Yeah, people that were kind of more niche or so, like have more community now. Like they can find people online, like or message boards, and have commonality and connections. And I mean, it might create bubbles or so, but there's definitely, people are more engaged.
I want to take a quick poll. Raise like one hand if you have one parent that's in social media, or both hands if both your parents are on Facebook or social media. Tammy, none? Right, me neither. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting thing, right? That's something also we talked about last week, is that younger generations are kind of influencing the older generations now. So they are, a lot of them, on social media and able to find their niche, right? Or people that agree with them. So that's just I mean, it'll probably continue that way.
Yeah. So I was just remembering, something I'd like to hear more about, just in general. I don't know if anyone can even talk about it, just when you're talking about things that are not spoken about and people like don't talk about things. Yeah, I was just curious, like what families, if any of your families are still kind of, like shunning discussion of certain
That's a good question.
things. I
Like
know, like
politics or anything more specific, kind of, or
I guess like both there's like drug addiction, there's sexuality is definitely a really big one.
Yeah,
these
mental illness.
days. Mental illness, yeah, that's a really big one. I feel like, because I mean, I have friends, I know families that are, feel certain ways about certain things, and it's like that, they handle things their way. They either talk about things or don't talk about things, and
Older generations do not talk about mental illness. Like, I think the same way that we're more open, or newer generations are more open, maybe.
I agree with you, Aaron. And I think, I mean, my thoughts, tell me if you guys agree with me. I think maybe newer generations are more able to discuss things because we realize maybe more how complicated things are.
I mean, I've seen the evolution of how gay being a gay in our culture has changed since when I was in high school to now.
Yeah.
I've seen that, like, because the
Yeah.
idea of gay marriage when I was in high school just wasn't something I was even really thinking too much about. To now, it just seems like it's a given right.
Yeah.
kind of
I
thing.
mean,
So I've seen.
I have more than one gay person in my family, and I still have. There are family members who aren't as accepting as others. So it's like it's odd because it's like I see both sides, you know. It's sad too, but it's like but some of it, it's like, you know, people are raised certain ways, and just like racism, it's like you're raised a certain way, and it's like you can't always just expect people just to turn a switch off of what was just ingrained in their head.
I think we all have like older grandmothers or had
Yeah.
them that like I was like my grandmother, you know, great person, but you know she used to listen to like Rush Limbaugh all the time. So just where you know I'd have conversations with her about it, but you know certain things you just accept at a certain point. You're not going to change probably.
Yeah, especially when they're in those years or so close to the end of life. It's just like
I know. I think it used to be very valued to know to not. It was seen as a good thing not to change your thoughts, right? To be steadfast on your beliefs and your values. And now I think it's more open to people are more open to you changing based on new information that you receive. I think people are looking and searching for information. You have to be open to change your views based on the information you receive. You brought up gay marriage, and in my poll that I shared last week, when people of each generation named these critical moments that define their generation, 1 out of 5 millennials said gay marriage, and that fell to that was number 4 behind September 11th, Obama election, and the Iraq-Afghanistan wars. Next was gay. But when you look to Generation X, gay marriage was number 8 on the list. And then for baby boomers, it didn't even make the top 10.
Wow.
You know, so you just see like how influential it can be on you based on your age and willingness to see things for what they are, right? Biology or.
I was gonna say we should probably also clarify that we're all completely cool with all sexualities and all races too.
I mean, that's the thing is like it kind of goes without saying. Just like when I appreciate you saying that, but it was kind of like when I was talking about Generation Z, right? And we were talking about diversity. They don't see diversity unless it's absent. You know, to whereas an older generation, they see diverse, they go into a room that's diverse and it's apparent to them. This is maybe out of my comfort zone, or not necessarily, they just know it's diverse, right? And the younger generation doesn't even see that. They're just like, this is normal. This is
the next generation. Yeah. Interracialism is not even going to be a thing. It's just going to be an acceptance.
Right.
I don't know when that's going to be though. I mean, just think about like things now, like with the Academy Awards, where you know the representation always becomes a big thing when they only have like white men, and it's there's no women or not a lot of like African American individuals nominated, so they always hyper focus on those things.
It reminds me of like even like things like Netflix. Like I feel like all their new shows, like they have, if you've noticed, like all the characters, they have like every race and then every sexuality in a lot of the new shows. Like it's becoming just everybody's everything.
I mean, I think it's different to us. We notice it because it is not the norm that we were used to growing up with. And then kids that are growing up today, that is their norm.
Yeah.
So if they were to watch older shows that we grew up on,
Well, I watched like a video where it was like young kids reacting to Seinfeld, and they were getting really triggered by some of the jokes. They were just like, "Oh my God, this is so offensive. When did this air?" And I was like, "Oh wow, okay." There's like just to see the generational differences between like a 15-year-old watching Seinfeld versus someone that's in their 30s.
But they all love Friends for some reason.
I don't know, maybe.
Look it up. Friends, the younger generations love Friends, bro. It's like one of their.
I'd say
favorite-
The Office is probably number one, but
The
Friends
Office.
is probably
The
pretty
Office
close.
is pretty big.
It's-
Yeah.
I know I learned from discussion, just like all of you, and even though we came from the same geographic location, born within almost a decade of each other. Well, I mean, thank you guys for discussion, everybody, and good input. It definitely made me think a little bit more about the differences and some of the things that define our generation as millennials. I'd still like to hear a little bit more from some of the generations that we didn't have represented here. Maybe in a future episode we could have, baby boomer or Gen Z. You can't discount all the individual experiences we had. So we're still all individuals and have diverse opinions on all these, and that kind of shows. But I think that's definitely important, and I'm glad to have you all here and open to discussing these topics, whether they might be uncomfortable or super easy to talk about. So that's why we're here. So thank you again, and
Please like us and subscribe. And stay tuned to our next podcast. See you then.